Good evening, beautiful world. My name is Troy Thrash, President and CEO of the Air Zoo Aerospace and Science Experience right here in beautiful Portage, Michigan. With over 100 rare and unique aircraft and spacecraft, aviation-themed rides and flight simulators, interactive science and technology exhibits, and inspiring hands-on educational programs, the Air Zoo is committed to immersing you in the remarkable stories of flight. One of those critical stories is the history of women who dared to head into the skies. Through our Women in Air and Space exhibit, we've opened several exhibits that tell the important stories of women like Amelia Earhart, Patty Wagstaff, the women suffragettes of the early 1900s, Susie Parrish, Air Zoo founder and Women's Air Force Service pilot in World War II, whose beautiful pink P-40 Warhawk flies through the Air Zoo lobby right behind me. And this, our fantastic new addition to our experience. We did it. The riveting real Rosies of World War II.
All the day long, whether rain or shine, she's a part of the assembly line. She's making history, working for victory. Rosie, the riveter, keeps a sharp lookout for sabotage. Sitting up there on the fuselage, that little frail can do more than a male can do. Rosie, the riveter.
The Air Zoo opened the We Did It exhibit to kick off Women's History Month in style. And tonight, we magnify it even greater as the Air Zoo, a Smithsonian affiliate, presents this exciting Because of Her Story program within the Smithsonian's American Women's History Initiative. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce the host of tonight's event. She has over 10 years in public service in local government and is currently the mayor of this remarkable city in which many of us live, work, and play. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a hearty virtual welcome to the mayor of Portage, Michigan, Patricia Randall.
Thank you, Troy, for the warm welcome. I'm very excited to be here and a part of this evening's program, acknowledging the accomplishments of women in a field not necessarily populated by women. I do recognize the importance of celebrating all women as we march through history, and I praise the Smithsonian and the Air Zoo in making this event possible. I am a firm believer that women in leadership does matter, and by encouraging others and offering a seat at the table, we will become the norm and not the exception. It is my hope that tonight will be one more example of a strong woman in an important role, and that this program will offer her a platform to inspire other women and girls to fly high. It is now my privilege to introduce Dorothy Cochran. She is the curator for the Smithsonian Institute, the National Air and Space Museum's Aeronautics Division, and our featured guest speaker for this evening. Welcome, Dorothy. She has a bachelor's degree in history from Ithaca College and a master's in education from Lehigh University. Dorothy currently curates the collection of general aviation aircraft and specializes in the history of general aviation and women in aviation. She is the co-author of the Aviation Careers for Igor Skigorsky and is the lead curator for the Baron Hilton Pioneers of Flight Gallery and the General Aviation, Business Aviation, Aerobatic Aviation, and Aerial Camera. Dorothy is the speaker coordinator for the museum's General Electric Aviation Lecture Series and Charles A. Lindbergh Memorial Lecture. She earned her private pilot license almost 30 years ago in 1994 and is a member of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association and the Experimental Aircraft Association. Now joining us live from Washington, D.C., welcome Dorothy Cochran.
Good evening, Patricia. Thank you for that nice introduction. I'm so pleased to be able to be part of this program tonight and talk about two of my favorite subjects, aviation and women, and how they do great things together.
Hopefully not in that order. Women first.
Women first.
Yeah. So anyway, my lead question is, what was the reason you became the curator of the General Aviation and National Air and Space Museum's Aeronautics Department? How did that come to be?
Well, as you mentioned, I have a background in my education was in history and in education. So those two things combined with an earlier lifelong interest in the Smithsonian itself. I had an aunt and uncle who lived in Washington, D.C., and when we visited them, we always went to the Smithsonian. The Air and Space Museum did not exist as it does now when, in that time frame. But then my husband and I actually moved there, and the first thing I did was to start shopping for a job at the Smithsonian, and I ended up at the Air and Space Museum, remarkably without a background in aviation, but the history and education then served me well.
Wonderful. What is the most exciting part of your role?
Oh, it's definitely the people that I've met. I've been so fortunate to meet so many wonderful people who have contributed to aviation, to history, and that's just been the most exciting part. You know, when you work with bringing in aircraft, the aircraft are exciting and we love to look at them and watch them fly, but it's always the people behind them that really make the difference. And aviation is just full of tremendous personalities.
What is the one thing you like most about being the curator for the Baron Hilton Pioneers of Flight Gallery?
Well, again, it's the people. You know, this gallery is mostly about the 20s and 30s, but we have learned so much about those people through the history, through the films, through the writing about them. And then we learn more about them when we talk to some of their relatives, or in earlier years when I started not long after the Museum on the Mall opened, there were still a lot of people who knew them firsthand. And so it was interesting to learn about them and then to be able to tell their stories. And I like to be able to get the chance. Right now we're redoing the gallery, and I like to get the chance to pull out some more information. You know, everybody knows a lot about Amelia Earhart, but there are other women, there are other people in the gallery, and just to be able to pull out new artifacts and tell new stories.
Interesting. I'm fascinated that you are a pilot. I love to fly, but I never considered becoming a pilot. What is the story behind you becoming a pilot, and how has piloting helped you in your daily work at the museum?
Well, as I mentioned, I didn't have a large aviation background. In fact, I hardly had any, except that I like to fly in general. And I had done some private flying with friends. But when I came on board, that was the one piece that I was missing. And as I was assigned, basically, when I took over the collection of general aviation, I realized I needed to know more about it and firsthand. And so I started to go out to a local airport, help people work on their airplanes, and then eventually became a student pilot. And as I did that, then, you know, I acquired more credibility and a little more respect from the people in the shops who were working on the airplanes. Now I knew what they were talking about, and, you know, and so that was part of it. Plus, I really enjoyed flying.
I know you often speak of the 99s. Did you know that one of the Air Zoo's co-founders, Suzanne Parrish, was a member? And can you share a bit with us about the group and their mission? Well,
I'll mention Suzanne Parrish first. Her legend, I should say, preceded her. The deputy director of our museum was Don Lopez, who was a World War II ace. And he flew P-40s and P-51s. And he got a kick out of that pink P-40 that Sue Parrish always flew. And I heard much about that before I ever saw her fly it. But then I did see her fly it at air shows and saw her in passing. But it was that pink P-40. And, you know, it was supposed to be the desert color. John Lopez always thought it looked a little more pink than the pink camouflage color on the desert, but nonetheless, he was always happy to see a P-40 fly, and he always, enjoyed meeting her. And she did so much, obviously, for aviation, and your great museum out there is obviously the keystone of that love of aviation. And as a 99, of course, that's a tremendous organization. And as some people know, and as I'll mention, it started in 1929 with a group of women pilots who flew cross country from California to the Cleveland Air Races in Cleveland, Ohio. And that was when they kind of all discovered that there were other women out there. Amelia Earhart knew about some of the other women and Louise Thaden. But when these women got together to fly this race to prove that women could fly transcontinental races, then they realized how much they learned from each other, how much they enjoyed being with each other, and how much they could help each other and network. So that was the real nexus, the reason to get together and form this group. And so moving forward then throughout the decades, that's what it's done, is been able to offer opportunity, to nurture other women, to encourage other women. Of course, now they have a huge scholarship program. There's all kinds of events. Their local chapters are just a lot of fun. Our local Old Dominion chapter here, those women, they're always flying off all the time, having a ball, and they're all dedicated to aviation. So it's a marvelous group. And, it's going strong, as is Women in Aviation International is another networking group for women. And they're having an ongoing conference right now. So it's balancing these two different organizations, and women belong to both of them, to just get more and more encouragement, more and more scholarships. Then they can mentor other women, encourage them. And women are just moving up and becoming leaders in aviation now. Finally, the pipeline has run through that. And so we have women who then can bring other girls and young women forward.
So it's women helping women.
Absolutely.
In the field of aviation.
Yeah.
We have a special video. Guests at the Air Zoo can explore more about Suzanne Parrish, the WASP, and the dozens of other women in aviation, such as Amelia Earhart, who is also newly featured at the Air Zoo. All right. We have a couple questions in. This one is from Maria Newhouse. Dorothy, you mentioned meeting lots of great people through your job. Is there a story that jumps to mind about someone you've met during your career that sticks with you today?
Well, I can say the first time I met Patty Wagstaff was at a group gathering called Sun and Fun down in Florida, Central Florida, that happens in the spring. And, I heard about this great aerobatic pilot, and I heard through other people that this woman was really going places and doing things. And she had won a national aerobatic champion. She became the first woman to win that, competing against men and women. So I was excited to meet her. And it's one of those things where you really find someone who's so interested in aviation, so interested in flying, just loves it, and is doing so much with everyone else and bringing other women along with her. And I watched her fly, and I had a feeling at some point that she was probably maybe going to think about getting another airplane. And I asked her, if you ever want to donate your airplane, give me a call. And it worked out that she did do that at one point. So that was one of those things where I made a wonderful lifelong friend. We brought in a woman in aviation, one of the first in the building of modern times, and we brought in a great aircraft. So it's that kind of thing. But, you know, we've just had a good time then joining in and encouraging other women to fly. And we've been able to do some flying together. And so it's just one of those win-win situations for all of us. And we're looking forward to putting our airplane back on display when we reopen in a year or so.
Wonderful. Dorothy, understanding one of your studies is on the history of women in aviation. Who do you consider to be the most interesting women in aviation history, and why?
Well, one of the women I really care about is Betty Skelton. And here's another, I tend to go to these aerobatics. Here's another aerobatic pilot. We acquired her aircraft in the 1980s, but I didn't know a lot about her until I really became responsible for her aircraft. And she's one of those women who really had to figure out a career for herself, kind of like Amelia. Post-World War II, she was a young woman who had really wanted to be a WASP. And I know that Suzanne Parrish kept trying to be a WASP, and she was too young, and she kept getting ratings and tried to get into it, and she made it. Betty did not. She just didn't turn 21 in time to be able to do that. And so she made herself a career as an airshow pilot and then an aerobatic champion. And so she did all of this on her own, really, you know, with people, of course, encouraging her. But this was the niche that she could find to fly, because women couldn't be airline pilots, women couldn't be military pilots. So she could be an instructor, and she did that with her family. But she really wanted to do something else, and she ended up being a 3-time feminine international aerobatic champion. But then, you know, what happens is she's now reached the peak, and there's really nothing else for her to do. There's nowhere else to go grow. So she sells her airplane, and she takes up driving instead. And so end up next thing you know, she's racing cars. And then she's doing publicity for Chevrolet and for Dodge. She actually drove Corvettes on the sands at Daytona, one of the first women to do that. So I like to take her life and just see how women transition. And she made her mark, and then she made her mark in advertising as well. So she just kept pushing, and I just admire her so much for that.
Well, she sounds amazing. You have written articles on Anne Lindbergh. Why did you choose to write about her?
Well, in the Pioneers of Flight Gallery, we have a Lindbergh airplane that is not the Spirit of St. Louis, although actually that will be moving into that gallery, the next iteration. But we also have a plane called the Lockheed Sirius. And that in that aircraft, Charles and Anne flew more than 40,000 miles in that aircraft doing surveys for early airline routes. This is before the airlines really existed. This was Pan American trying to figure out, okay, we want to make planes so that they can serve a purpose. We want to do a business. We want people to travel by airplanes. We have to figure out how we're going to get people from the United States to Asia or Europe. So they asked Charles Lindbergh, who was the technical advisor to Pan Am, to take survey routes to go fly and try to find the best ways. And he shocked everybody when he said he was going to bring his wife, Anne, who had really just gotten her pilot's license a year earlier, but had also learned Morse code, radio, celestial navigation, and they did all of these flights together. And one flight in 1931, and another in 1933. And from that, she did marvelous writing about these flights. 2 wonderful books, one called North to the Orient, the other called Listen to the Wind. And she also wrote articles and diaries. And so once I started diving into those, I became so enamored with her and how much she brought to the flights, and then how much she spoke about this time that's called the golden age of flight and what it really meant to fly still at lower levels. There's no oxygen yet. You're not flying that high. You're still in the elements a lot, even, and so really what that whole period of the 30s was about. And she just did some of the best writing on that era as ever. So I just wanted to keep exploring this marvelous woman.
As a female in a male-dominated profession, what do you see as your biggest challenge?
Well, I think the biggest challenge is now is us just getting up all the way to the top, which we're doing. The Air and Space Museum right now has a female director, our first female director, so Ellen Stofan. And so I think, it's just been getting the foothold and getting respected for each and everything that we bring to aviation, that we bring to then management, that we bring to, business, all that sort of thing. And the more women get in, I find that it was obviously a male-dominated profession at first. And we weren't really that welcome, or it was kind of like, well, she's crazy about planes, but, that's not the way it normally is. But as women have gotten into the business, I think they've really proven themselves, and they're pretty welcome now. I think we've really reached a point where women can expect to rise into all different types of positions and make a difference.
Do you know what the percentage of women are in the industry right now compared to men?
Well, I don't know about industry. In pilots themselves, they're still only about 8%, which isn't a lot. So that's why I say there's a lot of opportunity. I don't want to make it sound like, gosh, we're there and the work is done. But the pioneers have gone through, right, and they have reached leadership positions. So we've got about 14% of student pilots are women. So if we can keep pushing that through, and then into management, we've had it airlines with female CEOs. We've had CEOs, in government, U.S. transportation, FAA, that sort of thing. So we just need to keep that sort of thing going further, and just then pushing women. And then it becomes just expected. It's not, we're past the firsts, and we just need now to just keep moving and being a part of the business.
So would either one of the organizations that you mentioned earlier, the 99s or the Women in Aviation, do any of those mentor girls that want to get into flight school or offer scholarships for them?
Oh, absolutely. They both do. They both have very significant scholarship programs, and they mentor women and they guide them. And, we always talk about, just going to a business, going to an airport, do an internship. You can do internships at all the airlines, at most of the aviation organizations, businesses, start at the bottom, get education. You can go to all of these great universities now. Embry-Riddle, Michigan has got, Western Michigan, I think, one of the universities there does a really good job. There's a lot of aviation curriculums is what I'm trying to say, at a lot of different universities. And you'll find them listed on both the 99s and the Women in Aviation websites. So that's the goal now, is to just keep pushing and getting more women interested in it. You don't have to want to be a pilot. There's so many other things you can do. You can write, you can do photography, you can be a business manager, a dispatcher, a mechanic, all the things that you can think of, you can do in aviation.
Well, I'm looking back at your school history, and your undergrad was in history and your master's was in education, and maybe it was a move with your family to the DC area that led you to seek an opportunity that you always coveted, and location.
That helps. And
yeah.
Then, and then just being at the right place at the right time. There were women in the museum when I started. There was one female curator and one or two research assistants. But the person who hired me, he let me get through out of one, track and into another to really get to where I wanted to go. And he understood that right away, and he gave me that opportunity. And, that's opportunity is waiting for anybody who wants to join now. Like I said, there's so many ways in between volunteering or scholarships or fellowships, all that sort of thing, many, many ways to get into the business.
So you mentioned earlier before we went live that you had a granddaughter, and I'm wondering what you would tell her or other young girls that would like to learn more about the field of aviation history.
Well, there are a lot. First of all, it's open for business. When I was their age, and even when I got out of college, nobody thought of women being in aviation. It just wasn't a field that seemed possible. What would you do there? Are you going to be a pilot? Well, you can't. I mean, women weren't hired for that yet. So it's now possible. It's all possible. And so all you have to do is get educated on maybe where you want to go or what you want to do, and then take those first steps that we've been talking about. But yeah, I mean, I got my granddaughter a Wonder Woman outfit, but I'll get her an Amelia.
She's going to fly one way or the other.
I'll get her an Amelia Earhart outfit next. So, but that's the thing. When I was growing up, it was, you can be a teacher, you can be a nurse, and those are great professions, but there's just so much more now. And so it's all out there. So the deal is to just get educated on what's out there and, just take opportunities. And again, like I say, there's all different aspects of aviation, transportation, that sort of thing. So it's all possible.
Well, it will help when the museums get open again so that people can see what is out there. I did want to note that you were published in the Smithsonian book and wrote some fascinating stories. And could you tell us a little bit about how this publication came to be and your participation in it?
Well, that Smithsonian American Women is published, of course, by the Smithsonian. And there's the group that you mentioned in opening, the Women's History Initiative. And that came about a few years ago. And the impetus was, of course, the upcoming, which just passed now, the anniversary of the women winning the right to vote. Mm-hmm. And so they wanted to honor that throughout all of the institution. And so that's where the seed for that book was started. And that book is full of all kinds of really interesting women who pushed boundaries from, a couple of centuries ago all the way up to the present. And, you'll find Amelia Earhart and Betty Skelton in there, but there's so many other women from across all the other museums and all the other areas that the Smithsonian covers, women who have been contributing to science and industry and medicine and everything, all these years. So that's where it came from, was the impetus because of the suffrage anniversary. And so it came out about a year ago now, and it's really an exciting, fun book. I was very pleased to work with the other women on it, and we all had a great time. It was a lot of fun getting to know each other's, what was the other person, what were the other museums working on? And I didn't know about that person. I didn't know about that woman.
Well, it was a fascinating read. Each page had somebody different on it. And we need to remember those women that were pioneers in their given fields and how they opened up the fields for the rest of us as we're coming through. And hopefully it'll be easier for the younger generation as well. So I want to thank you for sharing your expertise and your evening with us. I found your questions and answers to be fascinating. And thank you again for doing the virtual event. We missed not having you here in person, but due to COVID, this is what we have.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. I've enjoyed it very much. And I do hope to get out and see the Air Zoo when we can start traveling again. I look forward to it.
And we do have that pink plane here. So we'll look forward to seeing you. I want to thank the listening and viewing audience for joining us this evening. I would like to wrap things up by turning this back over to the Air Zoo's president and CEO, Troy Thrash.
Well, Dorothy, I can say this pink P40 right here is waiting to see you as well. So I can't wait until you travel out here to the Air Zoo. So I want to thank so much Mary Randall, Dorothy Cochran, really for a scintillating discussion, and to the Creative Going Digital team for the behind the scenes work that really brought this event tonight to reality. So for those of you at home, you can learn more by checking out the Smithsonian website, si.edu, or searching hashtag because of her story. And for more inspiring education from the Air Zoo, go to airzoo.org and immerse yourself in our Launchpad to Learning video that's going to close out our night in just a second. So thank you all for tuning in to a wonderful program. This is Troy Thrash signing off from the Air Zoo in 3, 2, 1.